I was really lucky to be in China for 2020 and 2021 because most of the world at that time was on fire with the COVID everywhere and just protests and just all kinds of political nonsense. But as 2022 comes along, not so much. As you look at what's going on in Shanghai and stuff, it's just been like, oh man. So they had everything going right and now everything's changing. And so here's kind of the story of life in China during COVID. So I guess, as you know, there started to be some reports, I guess in maybe December 2019 of, some cases in Wuhan. And so I guess I remember talking about this a bit at my apartment in Chengdu with a couple coworkers. We had heard of the news in Wuhan, and we figured it would be like SARS, like what happened in 2003, where it was not that big, like a few hundred people or a few thousand people got it, but it was going to be the end of the world. Obviously that wasn't the case. And so I had planned a bike trip in Yunnan at that time. And I would have had a few more people, but of course, this news kind of came about and people got more nervous. So I only had a couple guys come with me. Here's a clip from that time to give you kind of my mindset.
Nice. So we're off on a another trip here. This time we're heading down to Yunnan. This is the first time I'm doing a bike trip with a group here. Well, actually, not a big group. There's only 3 of us. But yeah, it should be nice. So it's Chinese New Year, which started yesterday. You can hear that in the background. It kind of sounds like it's World War III. And we probably would have had a few more people maybe, but this coronavirus just hit. I don't know if that's how you pronounce it. I just know like the Corona beers spelled the same way. And so it's a little bit of a panic in China now. They've locked down a few cities, Wuhan and some other areas. But we're kind of in the middle of the countryside in Yunnan, so I'm not worried about it at all. So it's been quite the interesting trip so far.
Yeah, so we were like out in the middle of nowhere, and yeah, Lugu Lake's like totally like far away from anything. And so I'd driven up and I'd seen the sign. I was like, you got to be fucking kidding me. And there's only one road to get through to get to like Dali or Lijian, basically. And so I tried to go up a road, and it was just a million cars were stuck in the snow. It was just a disaster. And I had already booked all these hotels in advance, so I had to cancel everything. And then, I still had considered going to some of the areas, but they're like all of those places were closed. So I was like, holy shit, this is serious. It was just, before it was just Wuhan, and now it was almost all of China. The parks and things were basically getting closed. And so luckily we improvised. I just stayed kind of around Panzhihua on that trip and like southeast Yunnan, and came back, and we were still able to get hotels. It was still a bit of a challenge, but we were able to get that trip done okay. Thank God, Yunnan's generally more laid back than other places in China, so we were able to still have a nice trip. And I mean, it was weird going back because there's like no one on the highway, and getting into Chengdu, we were a little nervous, but we got in okay and finished that trip. And my next trip then, only a few days after that, was I went to Cambodia. I even had like a little joke party, like a Corona party, because I was still not really taking it seriously. I was like, whatever, I mean, I'm just trying to make light of a situation. So I did like Corona party, having Corona beers and stuff. And so I took off for Cambodia, of course, with the intentions of still coming back to China, regardless of the situation. Now, at this time, most other foreigners had left and were like, "Holy shit! Like, I'm not going to come back until the situation's much, much better." Little did any of us know that they were going to close the borders, which they did around March 28th. And so about 2/3 of them never ended up making it back. And so I only intended about 3 to 4 weeks in Cambodia, I guess. My one of my best buddies, a Turkish guy I met in Taipei years ago, is working there. So I stayed with him, and me and my best friend did a motorcycle trip around. We were hanging out there, and my buddy Charlie went back first. He got back to Kunming okay, no issues. And actually, I probably would have left sooner because I could see the situation was getting weird. They had closed the border to Thailand, and of course, the U.S. had closed the border to China. And I was definitely feeling nervous, but I wanted to do tours in Cambodia. And so I was trying to get my driver's license so I could drive people and still do bike tours or whatever, but I wanted to get my license. They don't make it easy like China. You got to, take a test and all this kind of stuff. It's not like you could just use an international driver's license. And so I was kind of busy doing the paperwork for that and studying for that and hanging out. And yeah, I had my 40th birthday there, and good time. And then it was like I was monitoring the situation really close. And you have to understand one of the reasons why I wanted to come back is if you don't know, I do tours in China. So I have a van here. I've got like 10 bikes. I've got backpacks and tons of instruments and different things. A huge apartment. I have a shuffleboard. I mean, I just tons and tons of stuff. So me leaving, like for anyone to get stuck outside sucks. But like I definitely have a lot more things there that I at least would have wanted to sell. Of course, 2 years later, I am leaving, but at that time, I definitely wanted to return and everything like that. So I was quite nervous, monitoring the situation closely. And I think it was probably March 26th. I want to say it was like a Thursday, and I'd seen it was like China's closing the border the next day on that Friday, or at least on that Saturday. So Friday would have been the last day I could have gone back. And I was like, holy shit. And I just checked the regular flight tickets were only like, $100 or $200. And now it changed to $1,000. Of course, like everyone's trying to get back, right? And so yeah, I bought a ticket for the next day. I told me, hey dude, I gotta go. And I was on the last plane basically back to Chengdu. Any foreigners could get in. And if that plane was delayed or I couldn't have got left that day, I would have been locked out of China for I couldn't say indefinitely. There was a small window in November that, like, next year, I know a few people got in, but you would have had a job. It was really tough. You definitely wanted to get in at that time. So earlier in March or even mid March, you didn't really have to quarantine. So a lot of those people came back from wherever they were, Cambodia, Thailand, the UK, wherever they were, and they didn't have to quarantine. They just maybe did a test and went home and quarantined on their own. But by the time I got there, we had to go to the hotel for 2 weeks. And it wasn't the end of the world. It was just like, it kind of sucks because, of course, like I even looked online, like that hotel, of course, was cheap because of COVID, right? Let's say like 150 a night, and they charge you like 400 renminbi or something, $75, $80 a night, and then you had to buy food every day. Which luckily we could get deliveries. I had this like little robot come to the door and bring us all the food. And then I thought I would be a smart ass because, of course, I was bitter about the situation because at this time in my mind, it's like it was probably from an animal, right? I mean, now I think it was probably a lab, but at that time I was like, I mean, if you were selling bats in a market after this whole SARS thing happened in 2003, I mean that's a big fuck up, right? And they've already should have learned from that and not been selling wild animals to begin with. And so now I'm all of this. I can already tell the whole world by this time is fucking totally screwed. We were all in a group chat in WeChat, and we were supposed to order food from that or whatever the first couple days because we couldn't get Meituan food delivered the first couple days. And so I kind of was like, "Oh, it's chilly in here. Can I get a warm bowl of bat soup, please?" And everyone just had a meltdown. Fuck you, they're so mad and bitter and all this stuff. I even joked. I was like, "You set up a couple girls too?" I was just trying to laugh, because you're stuck in this like a prisoner basically for a couple of weeks, right? Because people didn't want to take responsibility, right? There was probably some people even in Wuhan who knew it was going. Like you saw that one doctor around January who tried to expose it. He ended up dying, and there was that huge story. But I think people even knew well before, and they were afraid to say anything. So whether it was the lab or the animal thing, anyway, it sucks, right? And everyone has to pay for it. I just did the 2 weeks there. I went home, and it was funny too because my university at this time had told all of the employees, stay where you're at. Don't come back to China. So the two guys I worked with that lived above me, they didn't end up making it back. And so all of their stuff was stuck there, and the school didn't even send their stuff back. It's horrible. Um, I helped them out with a few, like the important things, like their degree or whatever, and whatnot. But yeah, and you can't send laptops. You can't send lithium batteries. So a lot of people couldn't get their laptops either. But yeah, so that was a real big bummer. All of these people, had all their stuff left in Chengdu and families split apart and whatever for now over 2 years, to almost 2.5 years now. And so it's been a big bummer. But I was glad to still make it back. And, of course, like I said, 2020 and 2021, it was a hassle traveling and living here in many ways, but it was much better than like America at that point had obviously exploded with COVID, and Spain and Italy were already horrible. It was really ironic. You could look up this video, or maybe I'll post it in the description below. There was a Italian guy of Chinese descent who made a video like around January of that time that said, kind of like stop the Asian hate kind of thing, or like we are not a virus. It wasn't the hate thing yet. It was more we are not a virus. And so it was all these Italian people hugging him, and like, and then sure enough, Italy and Spain got slammed right after that. And the thing that really pissed me off was that during Chinese New Year, Chinese were able to leave. So they had already locked down Wuhan and most of China, but they're like, sure, go ahead. They knew what was going on, and they went to America and all kinds, millions of Chinese, abroad. And so they played like this victim card thing. And then so when the foreigners came back to China, I was like, well, I guess there shouldn't be an issue with us, right? Because it didn't technically come from us. I mean, I know that they've said it came from America, which to me sounds pretty ridiculous, because why would America even send that off when they knew it would affect America the worst? I mean, America's like an open border country, very open. No one would ever listen. So you wouldn't unleash a weapon on someone that would have little effect on them, but would damage you 100 times more. It'd be like dropping a nuclear bomb on yourself, and some of the radiation might hurt your enemy a little bit, but you're mostly going to get hurt. So I don't even think, it seems a surprise to me that, people would think this Fort Detrick thing. There was some weird illness like the year before, something like that. But if it was COVID, then DC or that area of Virginia or Maryland or whatever would have had tens of thousand cases by the time Wuhan did. So I don't see how that made any sense. And that place had some investigations already going on from some unrelated stuff. So there was already a lawsuit with Fort Detrick from 2 or 3 years before, and they had suspended a lot of operations there. So that to me would seem like a pretty unlikely argument. But nevertheless, even still today, I think most Chinese do believe that it came from Fort Detrick, and that during the military games in October of 2019, they had brought it in that way. Anyway, I'll make a different video on like my theory of the COVID thing with that. That's kind of a separate thing. So yeah, life in China. I mean, I was able to travel and do a lot of things in 2020, 2021. I just made that one video about how hard it is to get hotels. That's like the toughest thing in traveling in China. As soon as I got out of quarantine, I did 2 weeks at the hotel and then 2 weeks on my campus. And then I planned a trip to a lake nearby, so we camped, so that was all right. And then the next weekend, we were supposed to get 3 nights of hotels, because 4-day trip, 3 nights in a hotel. And it was quite hot out, and those guys are cycling every day. So, of course, they want a hotel every day so they can shower. And we couldn't find a hotel anywhere. And so we had to camp. And there was the last night we were able to shower in like a restaurant or something. And so I knew at that time, I was like, oh man, it's going to be so tough to get hotels, which was the case. And ironically, I was just in that same area a couple of weeks ago. And this is 2 years later. And luckily, the first 2 nights, we got nice hotels, so I knew it wouldn't be an issue. The third night, the COVID police came. They like tested us. They were freaking out because there's a few cases in Chengdu. But yeah, it's still really tough to find hotels during this time. And yeah, it was frustrating because after they were playing the victim card, like that guy in Italy and Chinese people in Western countries around like January and February, it was like I got out, and already by April or March or April, basically April, May, it was like, ugh, foreigners. I was like, oh my God. And so everyone in the country, like, totally, like, it would be different if it was like a year later, or even 6 months later, for them to change this attitude so quickly. Like, why could they not think it could be like another Chinese who came back who was traveling or something? But it was like, no, as soon as they saw foreigners, because obviously the publicity on the news 24/7 by this time was like, America's hit really bad, Spain's hit. And so all of the news they're getting consumed with 24/7 is just like, America, the world is on fire and we're doing a great job, which, in all fairness was true. It's just that like they didn't put the caveat that like most of the foreigners were tested, did quarantine, and cannot like enter this country easily. It's not like I just drove my car from New York over to Beijing or Kunming or Chengdu, or we have an open border country and these foreigners are just, no, it's so difficult to come in here, whether you're Chinese or a foreigner. So they made everyone super, super paranoid about us wherever we've gone for a couple of years now. People sometimes when you get to the hotel, they already have the hazmat suit, and they're like, oh, when did you get here? What, you just got here. It's like, no, I've been here for years, And so that's what's really annoying, is that the people here really just assume like we just got off the boat, It's And it's not even just the hotels. I mean, even a few months ago, I had a little, get together up in my apartment on the roof, and we went down to a neighborhood bar in Chengdu, and a young guy, he's like 25, 30, and he's like, "When did you guys arrive in China?" and asking all these questions, and big disappointment. And I was out in the Tibetan area, and I went to watch. It's kind of cool. Those Tibetan areas have usually the bars they'll have like a KTV or dancing and singing, so it's a little bit more interesting than just a bar with nothing or with just regular KTV. And a guy came up and he was grabbing me. He's like, go home." And I think he was talking about like go home to the hotel or the police didn't want me out or whatever. But that was quite obnoxious. And as I mentioned too in the other video, yeah, one of my buddies at the gym got punched in the face for no reason, just for being a foreigner, basically. But I mean, generally speaking, it's not that big of a deal as far as like, we've still at least been able to live our lives pretty normally. There hasn't been too many lockdowns, at least in Chengdu. Um, it has happened a few times where there was a few cases and certain areas were locked down for like 2 to 3 weeks. I know my buddies at the university couldn't go out for a couple weeks because a few students had COVID. So it's pretty much by your apartment complex, basically. So they at least have limited it like that. So there's only been, a few times in the last 2 years where it's been like, a little bit more difficult to go out, or like some of the bars and restaurants will close for like 2 or 3 weeks, which we're kind of coming out of that right now. As some of you know, if you've seen the news, as of April 2022, the situation in Shanghai is completely blown up. And quite frankly, I knew this would happen. Like, because when the COVID broke out and they said there was like no cases, like, of course there was more cases than that. And although they did a great job, like I'm sure it's been little outbreaks all over the country, much more than that's been reported. And one reason, it's not that the government's hiding it necessarily, although that's part of it. The people are afraid to admit it. Of course, like if they have some symptoms and they think they might have it, like they probably are just going to stay home. I remember when a year and a half ago or so when one girl had it basically, and the whole city knew about it, and they said where she went, what her name was, and what she did. And they said you're a whore for going out and blah blah blah. And so the entire city or country knows about it, and they make you out like you're just the worst person in the world, such because this girl went to a bunch of bars or whatever. And so it's just like I can imagine there's many people in China that have been sick, and it's kind of like I don't want my whole apartment complex or neighborhood to get shut down for 2 weeks. I don't really even know if I'm sick with COVID or not, but I'm just gonna stay home for a couple weeks and not say anything. And then that way it actually does spread more, right? So I'm sure there's been a lot more Delta and other variants that have gone around China in the last 2 years, but these swabs are not catching what, half or two-thirds of it. It seems like it. And as soon as I saw this Omicron thing, I was like, there's no way China's gonna be. There's so many people still coming out in and out, and not foreigners, but like Chinese businessmen and stuff coming in and out. So they're still trying to point this it's foreigners or Americans. The embassy released it and all these kinds of things. But it's super contagious, 10 times more than the other ones. So I knew that this was going to happen, and quite frankly, I'm surprised they haven't found more like in Chengdu and other areas. But that's because they're also not like some cities are doing like all city testing. Like I think Xi'an just did. Chengdu's just testing certain parts of the city. So they're like, okay, we test a few. Oh, there was a few more cases in this community, but they didn't test everywhere. Like I've never been tested in Chengdu, like through my community or whatever. Now I leave every weekend almost to go traveling, so I get it almost every weekend before I leave. That's a separate thing because I'm leaving. But actually, people living in Chengdu, like I don't think a lot of the people have been tested. Lately, they've done universities in schools and stuff like that, in certain businesses and stuff in certain areas, but they haven't done a city-wide test. So to me, that would actually be the way of really finding out. And I'm almost glad they don't because, like right now, I can't. I was supposed to even have class today, and I just have to do it online. And I can't do tours a lot of the time. If there's cases in Chengdu, all of the areas of Western Sichuan will not take anyone. Like I mentioned in the other video, I was out in Kanding, a Tibetan area, and my friend brought all of his stuff out there to stay for a month. And there was some case they found like 100 kilometers away or a few hundred, I don't even know where. They said it was from Argentine beef or something. It's always some foreign thing, right? And God forbid anyone from China could have had COVID and went to that region, right? And so they were like, get in your car, get out of here, drive back to Chengdu. Police escort out of town. They're like, get out of here. Like, there's Argentine beef, few hundred kilometers away. that's positive, you need to get the fuck out, man, because this somehow is related to me. And there was actually a case, it's funny, because there was an American girl who was out in Donba around that time, another really pretty area, and she wasn't so diplomatic about it. She was freaking out on Twitter and like, "Oh, they're gonna take me into quarantine," and blah blah blah. And she was being really sarcastic, and people took it as like kind of being racist. So instead of highlighting the fact that it was kind of messed up that they just made her leave because she was a foreigner and should do it to anyone, let's say from Chengdu. And so she ended up losing her job at the university in Chengdu, and they kicked her out of China basically. So yeah, you got to be careful. You know, they're going to really spin that around pretty easily. So they really take obviously this kind of stuff really sensitive, and as you can imagine, this anti-foreigner things like just up times 10. Before COVID, you know, I felt this around 2016 or so, probably because of Trump in some ways, but also because of the nationalism and just a party line here and whatever with the government, just propaganda all day long. And so it's definitely been a change China. As a, you know, I just made a long video you could check out 2006 until now when I first lived in Kunming. You could kind of see how it's changed over the years. But yeah, anyway, I mean, other than that, you know, I've been able to like, you know, whatever, go out to bars, hang out, do some parties at my place. Luckily, my apartment complex, the guys have been really nice in general, and I've been able to have people over, and I could still find some bars, a different place to go out. Not everything's closed, even when there's a few cases in the city. But yeah, it's definitely time to leave. I mean, you can see what's going on in Shanghai. I don't need to show you all these videos. You can look it up for yourself. They basically locked down the entire city, taking people out of their apartments in many cases and put them in makeshift camps, and just when they don't really need to do that. And of course, I think a lot of this is about control, and there's other political things, but you know, that's the way it goes. Yeah, and as you know, it's certainly not easy to come and go. Like some people, like diplomats or at some international schools, they're able to get people to come here, and you still got to do 2 or 3 weeks quarantine and stuff. The big problem is that if you do leave, it's not too expensive leaving, maybe like twice as much as usual or 30% more, depending on where you go. Coming back here is thousands of dollars for the flight. So, like, I was going to consider leaving, coming back this summer to continue doing tours and living in China. And I'm just like, I'm not spending thousands of dollars and living in a hotel for 2 weeks and then all this stuff. And, you know, so it was a deal breaker for me and for everyone else. Like I mentioned, two-thirds of foreigners didn't make it back when the initial pandemic broke out. And of course, all those people were upset, all the students and all the people who couldn't make it back. And then you've got, since then, every year, more and more people have been leaving, especially the last few months. You know, I've noticed a lot of people, they didn't renew the visas for people doing business in China and stuff like that. Luckily, as an English teacher, I was able to get another one. But yeah, that's a big issue. And this summer, like everyone's leaving. You know, I think it's only going to be about a third of the people that were left that were here. But the overall numbers, like in Chengdu, for instance, like if I was to compare, let's say this summer compared to pre-pandemic, I think it'll only be about 15%. You know, all of my friends or most of them have gone, and yeah, it's really changed the city. You know, because it used to be a lot of fun. There's a lot of students here. There was a lot more people. There was a lot more stuff going on. There was bike trips and all kinds of cool things. Now, I've been actually done pretty well doing tours, but it's just and the reason why I did well was because most of the people know it's so hard to travel, so they will come with me. So actually, my business in that way did well. The only crappy thing is that there's a lot of people from Shanghai and Beijing and other cities that want to come here and they can't. So I lost that, and then of course I've lost all the international tourists, which pay much more too for these tours. So in the end, it really destroyed the tourism business. And you can check out my other video. I'm still trying to get my deposit because for the liability to join a company, I joined this company for like, let's say $2,500. But the big part of the money is the liability. So like if my insurance doesn't cover if someone, let's say, got hurt or died and it would cost, you know, 100,000 US dollars, or like, let's say it's $50,000. Well, they keep the insurance might not cover everything. So they kept like 13,000 US dollars of mine. And they're like, oh, it's no problem if you need to get it back. We know you're a foreigner and you might have to leave. And so last year I was going to try to do just business on my own, not through any company, so I get my own visa and stuff. And good thing I didn't. And you know, she's giving me the runaround and avoiding me. And I was like, all right, I'm going to end this contract. Can I get my money back? She's like, okay, in January. And now she's saying June. She's trying to get money. She's selling a house or something. So of course they just took all of the money, invested in real estate, and they could declare bankruptcy, and I'll probably never see that money. You know, so that's another victim. You know, it already sucked that I spent tens of thousands, well, maybe not tens of thousands, but a lot of money on my van and all that equipment and stuff, and then all the loss of income from you know, not getting clients. But I made it through. You adjust, and I assume that company did too. You know, It's like, okay, you can't get all these people, so you got to downsize, and you can still get through. I mean, the most of the last 2 years, Chinese people are still traveling and doing quite a few things. So of course it's not as good, but so I didn't think that they'd be like, oh, we're gonna go bankrupt, but we'll take your money before we do. Of course, they know the ship's sinking, and they're gonna grab my money before they go. So yeah, that's the final thing. It's like that COVID ended up screwing me over. Is that not only did I lose that aspect in all these years of trying to do a business and stuff here, but yeah, they're just going to probably take off for the money. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll come out with some more stuff on my time in China. I've only got a couple more months here probably, but I got a couple cool trips, a few trips, and some interesting insights. I'll talk about a few other things like being a teacher and stuff, and check out my other videos on some of my other topics. Take care, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.